Hello, my name is Jason Ankin and this is my vlog channel. Today's vlog is going to be a book review. Right, so I've recently just read a book called The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. Sort of interesting book. It's a strategical thinking book. Strategy book, basically. So first of all, who was Miyamoto Musashi? Well, basically, Miyamoto Musashi was basically a Japanese samurai warrior, and he went down in history for being one of the greatest samurais that ever lived, if not the greatest samurai that ever lived. And the reason why he was so he basically had so good. He basically won. I think it was 64 fights without losing a single bout at all. And he actually he had his first fight when he was 13, and he actually killed his first victim basically when he was 13 years old. And that sort of brings in the question, one of the things I was sort of thinking, is this guy really a legend if he's just killed 64 people? Sounds like a bit of a psychopath, but times were much different back then. This was written, I think it was written in the mid 17th century. So this book was actually written in 1643, so it's very, very old. It's a really, really well-known book. What's interesting about this particular copy is actually two books included in it. So you've got the Book of Five Rings, which is written by Miyamoto Musashi, and then you've another book called The Book of Family Traditions on the Art of War. I have yet to read that section. I'm going to read that next, but I thought I would just do a vlog on the Book of Five Rings specifically. Now, it's really interesting about this book. It's broken into 5 sections, as the name suggests, 5 rings. The first section it's broken into scrolls. So you've got the earth scroll, you've got the water scroll, the fire scroll, the wind scroll, and you have the scroll of emptiness. Now, I've had this book for a number of years. I've had this probably about, maybe I got this in my early 20s and I read it through once. But like I said, it's one of those books you can't really, you're not going to learn a whole lot just by reading through this once or twice. This is my second time doing it. I'm still sort of playing around with the ideas. I was really disappointed. I realized retrospectively after I read this through a second time, I had been practicing jiu-jitsu for 8.5 years, which is a Japanese martial art that Miyamoto Musashi himself would have been proficient in. And I regret not having read this book more frequently while I was doing jiu-jitsu. This should have been my go-to manual. I should have been reading this on a weekly basis. And the reason why is because at the end of each of his parables, there's tons and tons of different parables. He keeps mentioning this requires deep contemplation, or this requires practice. So he's always reinforcing the idea at the end of every parable, you must practice what I'm teaching you. It's not good enough to just read this and understand it intellectually. You have to actually practice it. And that's why I regret not reading this on a more regular basis when I was doing jiu-jitsu, because when I was doing jiu-jitsu, I could have taken these principles and actually applied them to my training, and it could have benefited me exponentially, I would imagine. But basically, so yeah, the different scrolls. So the earth scroll is the first one. He's really talking about his style of fighting, which he calls the individual school of 2 swords. So he's developed a style of fighting with 2 swords. A katana, which is the long sort of samurai sword in one hand, and a shorter, maybe like a shorter katana in the other hand. I can't remember the exact name. Then he goes on to talk about the wind scroll. no, sorry. He goes on to talk about the water scroll, and this is where he's literally talking about individual techniques that you can use as someone who's practicing with the sword. The fire scroll, he then goes on to talk about how these principles can be scaled up to, say for example, in battle, and then finally talks about the wind scroll, and this is where he's actually talking about the weaknesses of other schools, other martial arts schools, other martial arts systems, and then finally the scroll of emptiness is in which he's talking about basically the sort of the mindset that you're meant to have as a martial artist, the sort of empty, calm, sort of peaceful mind. Like I said, it's very difficult to sort of give you a clear understanding of what it is because I don't fully understand it myself. Like I said, or like he says in the book time and time again, is this requires practice, this requires you to actually apply what I'm saying. And he repeats that at the end of each parable. And in reality, that would probably be the biggest lesson that I've got from the book, is the sort of the need to sort of, when you take something up, a new task, whatever it is, in order to really get good at it, it requires that you contemplate a lot about it, and it requires that you actually practice it intimately. You intimately practice it until you understand it in detail. So that would be the biggest lesson that I got from it, something I kind of already knew. The thing about sort of these sort of Asian books that I've sort of read through, sort of like The Art of War and sort of Taoist and Buddhist literature, a lot of the stuff that I've read previously you will hear in this type of in this book also. So it's hard to try and find something that's unique that I haven't come across. What is really interesting more than anything is this individual himself, the guy Miyamoto Musashi. Regardless of the Book of Five Rings, this guy is an extremely unique individual. I actually watched a 90-minute documentary on Miyamoto Musashi. I will actually link it. I'll probably link it below in the description if you want to watch it. I would highly recommend it. And it's basically this individual who's also a sort of, I think he's like a European Kung Fu champion. And he basically goes on a Miyamoto Musashi pilgrimage. So he basically goes to all of the places. He goes to the place where he was born. It's actually called Miyamoto. And he just follows his sort of life throughout the documentary. And he actually goes to the locations of where he had battles and where he had his fights and stuff. So he wasn't a mythical individual. This is a real human, and he's worshipped in Japan, completely worshipped. And he sort of had a bit of a rough start. You know, he was born into sort of like a samurai family, and basically he was basically beaten and abused by his father, and he ran away at aged 8 years old. So at 8 years old, he was basically by himself, and he had to fend for himself. He spent a couple of years living in the wilderness. I think he spent 4 years living in the wilderness, and he just devoted his whole life to this samurai way of life. And he would just go around challenging people, and he would literally find the best of the best masters, and he would just he would basically kill them. And by doing that, he would take a master who is really well established, really well sort of thought to be unbeatable, and he would just destroy them. And by doing that, it elevated his reputation. And then eventually, I think around about his early 20s or late 20s, he started to sort of stop the killing. Basically, he stopped going around murdering people. Because I think he had found what he was looking to find, and then he just went sort of into the mountains and started meditating, and that's when he wrote this book, the Book of Five Rings. But yeah, this is and just the week before he died, he wrote this set of precepts called, I don't know the Japanese translation, but it's called It's called The Way of Walking Alone. So these 21 precepts you basically adhere yourself to, and just sort of, precept is basically a thing that you use to govern your behavior, to sort of live a more virtuous life. And basically it's sort of a pattern that I'm starting to notice with a lot of these sort of individuals that change the world. They tend to go alone. You know, when you see it in, for example, when I read about Buddhism, that's what the Buddha did. The Buddha, when he was 29 years old, he left his wife, he left his child to go and seek enlightenment. Miyamoto Musashi was, you know, he ran away when he was 8 years old. And it's definitely a pattern that I'm starting to notice. Another guy that comes to mind, a more modern example, is the guy Wim Hof, who's like known as the Iceman. He's kind of another sort of guy who's went his own way, but he's broke like 20 odd records in sort of cold tolerance, and by doing this he's actually been able to change how scientists think about human physiology, and his sort of breathing techniques and stuff have got into university textbooks. And that's sort of one of the things that I've started to, I relate to that really well, because I'm quite introverted, and I've always sort of thought, you know, I would much prefer to cut my own path and be sort of like a lone wolf, and live my life based on my own rules. And reading books like this sort of reinforces that, because it sort of shows that you don't have to be part of a group. You don't have to be part of a sort of a culture in order to sort of get by in life. You can actually cut your own path, and you can achieve exponential success, and notoriety and sort of fame and whatever it is that you want. But it's reading books like this that help you sort of understand that, you know, ultimately, you know, your life's in your hands, and it's really up to you to sort of make your life what you want of it. And that's what I sort of like about reading these type of books. So yes, yeah, like I said, I really regret that I wasn't reading this throughout my jiu-jitsu training, but I will definitely be rereading this again. This will sit on my bookshelf that I actually, a lot of my books I put into storage, I put into boxes and stuff, but this will be sitting on the bookshelf that I actually read from. So I'll be putting that back, and I'll be going back into this many times, I'm sure. So yeah, really good book. That's really it today. So yes, my name is Jason Ankin, this is my vlog channel, and thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you later. Bye.